Educational GMAT. Your partner in your GMAT journey.
This is not very difficult. I'll give you guys a couple of minutes on this. Waveton hosts an annual week-long craft fair. Yes, friends. So obviously, this is the conclusion, right? So what do you think is the assumption here? By the way, in critical reasoning, as we've been discussing, process of elimination is also a very prominent strategy. Can someone tell me why is alpha not the right answer? Why is alpha not the right answer? A. Again, yeah, so again, as we discussed in a previous class, revenue minus cost is equal to profit, right? So what is the scope of this argument? Is it revenue, is it cost, or is it profit? It's the revenue of the government. Taxes always contribute to the revenue part, right? So the revenue, in fact, it's very clearly given. Waveton's revenue would decline by $20,000, right? Now, providing facilities for food vendors obviously is a part of the cost. We don't care about that because the scope of the argument is revenue from taxes. So cost or profit for this particular argument would be out of scope. Okay. So then which one do you think is the right answer? Again, as I said, never really worry whether you get the right answer or not, but then take a stab. Now let's look at Baker, for example. Attendance at the craft fair would not decline significantly if there were no food vendors there. Is that really an assumption? Is that really an assumption for this conclusion to be true? No. Even if it declines, so what? We are basically saying that if food vendors don't come, the restaurant tax would decline by $20,000, right? So Baker is not really playing a role in this at all. Okay. Now we are left between Charlie, David, and Edward. Sorry, David. All right. So Gautami is saying David. Harin is saying Edward. What do you guys think? Should I surprise you guys? Yeah, Charlie is the right answer. Now, perhaps some of the confusion is as a result of this as a result of this word few. We did discuss this, by the way, the difference between few and a few. Please do remember, and by the way, we do another question also here. Few means hardly any. A few means some. Few means hardly any. All right. So just substitute this with hardly any. Hardly any people who eat food from the food vendors during the weeks of the crafts fair would eat at Waveton's restaurant instead if the food vendors were not available. Now that you know that Charlie is the answer, can you tell me why is Charlie? See, hardly any is almost zero, almost zero. As I said, hardly any is almost zero, correct? So let's first negate this. Remember, negation is a powerful technique, right? So instead of few, how do we negate this? Almost everyone. Agreed? Okay, now what is Charlie saying now after negation? That if food vendors were not available, which is the plan here, then what we are saying is that all people who used to eat at the food vendors would now eat where? At the restaurant. So if that's the case, then clearly there'll be no decline in the revenue. See, because the Waveton government is now deriving the same amount of restaurant tax. It's just that instead of deriving that tax from food vendors, it is now directly deriving that tax from the restaurant. So if we negate Charlie, then the conclusion that the revenue would decline by $20,000 becomes invalid. Tell me, Aaron. Yes. Yes. Yeah, yeah. So, by the way, this says here, right? Which the following is an assumption on which the argument depends. So, okay, by the way, this is something that, again, we've been discussing in the last few classes, that the question may say argument, but is basically the conclusion, right? So, on which of the following is an assumption on which the conclusion depends. And what is the conclusion? And the conclusion is that the revenue, the government's revenue from restaurant tax would decline by $20,000 if food vendors discontinue from the fair. All right. And I'm hoping now it's clear that if we negate Charlie, that almost if the food vendors were not available, almost everyone who was eating at the food vendors would now switch to the restaurants, then obviously that decline will not happen. So negating option Charlie is invalidating the conclusion. Okay, how about David? The food vendors at the crafts fair report their sales for the week of the fair accurately for tax purposes. Now, the thing is, first of all, even if it was inaccurate, right? So there is nothing to differentiate that this inaccurate position would make, see, it was $20,000, right? Whatever it was, it would reduce. Basically, that's the whole point. Well, even if it was inaccurate. So even if $20,000 was inaccurate, ultimately the whole idea is that 20,000 will come to zero if food vendors discontinue. Right? Finally, let's look at Edward. The average price of food purchased from the is significantly lower than the price of similar foods eaten at the restaurants in Waveton. This would not in any way affect the conclusion. Whether people are paying more or lesser to the food vendors, whatever they are paying. The point is, whatever they are paying, obviously they are being taxed, and that tax totals to $20,000. Now, whatever they are paying to vendors, is it more or less than the fair price compared to the restaurant price? That would not contribute to the conclusion. Any doubt with any option here? All right. So again, reiterating in this kind of a question, as we've been discussing, the assumption is an unstated premise, right? Let's do that. So right now, what happens? The city is Waveton. The city collects $20,000 in restaurant taxes from the food vendors, right? If the fair were to discontinue the food vendors, hardly anyone would eat at the restaurant. Hence, Waveton's revenue would decline by $20,000. Right? So making this assumption a part of the premise makes the conclusion very valid. Okay, let's proceed then.